Taurus, you have become very dangerous. They are not expecting this. Have you ever realized in the middle of an ordinary day that you were done waiting for the apology that never came, for the recognition that was always delayed, for the peace you tried to build in places that only gave you noise? If that awareness has touched your heart lately, Taurus, this message might be exactly what your soul has been waiting to receive. Welcome to Zodiac Wisdom. I'm Sophia, a psychologist, astrologer, and your companion in the quiet spaces where transformation begins. This channel isn't about forecasts or fear. It's about remembering who you truly are, beneath the roles, the responsibilities, and the weight of always holding it together. And today's message? It's not gentle, but it is healing. Because Taurus, you're known for your loyalty, your stability, your ability to hold space for others with grace and grounding. But what the world often forgets is that still waters run deep. And when a Taurus finally stops tolerating what once felt bearable, they don't erupt, they evolve. And that evolution, it can be terrifying to those who never expected you to leave. By the end of this video, we're going to explore the moment you stopped chasing peace and started embodying it. We'll talk about the silence you've stepped into, and why it speaks louder than any confrontation. And I'll share with you a story from one of my Taurus clients, a woman just like you, who became powerful the moment she chose herself. If something in this message touches your heart, please let me know in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe if this space feels like home, because here your truth is sacred. Your voice matters, and your healing, it's already unfolding. Take a deep breath. You're safe here. Let's begin. Gate 1, the quiet shift. When Taurus stops explaining. Every Taurus awakening begins in silence. Not with slamming doors. Not with ultimatums. But with the subtle, almost invisible moment when your heart whispers, I don't have to explain myself anymore. And that is the beginning of everything. Taurus, you're ruled by Venus, the planet of love, beauty, and deep sensual value. People often associate you with comfort, with home, with the ability to create safety for others. But what they often miss is how much you've given without asking for anything back. How many times you've forgiven, overlooked, stayed quiet, just to keep things steady, just to keep love intact. But stillness isn't the same as peace. And eventually, even the most grounded soul begins to feel the strain of carrying what was never meant to be theirs. I want to tell you about a woman I worked with last year. Her name is Marianne. She's 51, a Taurus. She ran her own cafe for over a decade, rose at 5 a.m., fed half the town, remembered birthdays, made space for anyone who needed a safe table. But at home, she was invisible. Her husband, though never cruel, rarely looked up from his phone. Her grown kids expected her to be okay no matter what. Her sister only called when she needed something. One day during a session, Marianne paused mid-sentence and just stopped. Her eyes welled up and she said, I think I've spent my whole life explaining my love through service. And no one ever thought to ask how I'm really doing. That moment, that was the shift. She didn't scream. She didn't demand. She didn't need to, because something inside her had already made the decision. Taurus, when you decide it's enough, there's no turning back. You don't make dramatic exits. You quietly stop participating in your own neglect. You begin to notice the rooms where your value is assumed, not honored. You begin to ask different questions. Does this give back to me? Do I feel safe here, or just obligated? And eventually, what if I stopped pouring where there's no cup? That's when everything changes. People around you might say you've changed, that you've pulled back, that you're being cold. But you're not cold, you're clear. And clarity for Taurus is the most dangerous thing of all, because it means you've stopped explaining yourself. You've stopped overgiving. You've stopped translating your needs into language for others to understand. Now you're moving differently. You're no longer showing up to conversations that circle back to guilt. You're no longer the first one to check in, to apologize, to make it right. You're not asking if your presence is wanted. You're deciding if it's deserved. And Taurus, this kind of shift shakes people, especially those who've benefited from your quiet loyalty. But this time, their discomfort is not your responsibility. You've held up relationships, families, workplaces, entire communities with your strength. But now, you're holding space for yourself. You don't need their validation anymore. You've remembered your own value. There's another Taurus woman I deeply admire, Her name is Nee 47, a midwife who's delivered over 400 babies. Her hands have literally caught new life. But for years she had no one to hold her. She was the strong one. Always. Until the day she didn't answer the phone. She told me, "I used to believe love meant availability. Now I know it means alignment." Taurus, when you stop explaining, when you stop giving reasons for your rest, your absence, your boundaries, you step into your most magnetic energy. That's when people realize they weren't just lucky to have you. They were honored. And those who still deserve access to you, they'll show you. With presence. With respect. With effort. So if you're in that space now, the quiet space, the one that feels both lonely and liberating, I want to say this clearly. You're not wrong for choosing peace. You're not selfish for stepping back. You're not difficult for needing more. You're finally aligned. And in the next chapter, we'll go deeper into what happens when you've walked away. And how your absence, your silence, your calm refusal to re-explain yourself becomes your most powerful answer yet. Gate 2. The absence that speaks, when Taurus stops being available. Taurus, your presence has always been your love language. You show up. You remember the details. You anticipate the needs of the people you care about before they even ask. And for a long time, that presence, your consistency, your quiet loyalty became the glue holding things together. But what happens when the glue starts to dry? When you're the only one still trying to hold, you stop showing up. And suddenly, your absence says more than your presence ever could. Not because you're punishing anyone, but because you're finally honoring yourself. There's something people often don't understand about Taurus. They think you're calm because nothing bothers you. They mistake your steadiness for passivity. But what they don't see are the 1,000 little moments you noticed, forgave, and moved past silently. Until the silence grew so loud inside you that you couldn't hear anything else. I think of Carla, a Taurus woman I worked with 2 years ago. 55. Owns a small floral studio. She told me, "Sophia, for most of my life I was everyone's safe space. But when I needed somewhere to land, there was no one." Her story is like so many Taurus hearts I've witnessed. She was always available. The emotional rock. The one who remembered anniversaries. The one who checked in when others disappeared. But when she went through a quiet personal loss, a miscarriage no one knew about, she didn't get a single phone call. Not because people didn't care, but because they'd gotten used to her being fine. Always fine. That's when she stopped being available. Not in a cruel way. In a clean way. She started pausing before answering messages. She let calls go to voicemail. She stopped giving emotional support to people who hadn't earned it. "I thought I'd feel guilty," she told me. But what I actually felt was relief. Taurus, I want you to hear this. Your absence is not petty. It's sacred. Because it's not about cutting people off. It's about recalibrating your boundaries after years of overfunctioning. It's about recognizing where your energy has been consumed without care, and choosing finally not to offer it on demand. Your availability has been your gift. But gifts are meant to be received with gratitude. Not expected. Not taken for granted. Not drained. There's a part of you that might worry. Will they think I've changed? Yes, they might. But the truth is, you're not changing. You're remembering. Remembering who you were before you stretched yourself thin. Before you accepted emotional breadcrumbs. Before you made yourself small in the name of being agreeable. When Taurus stops being available, people start noticing things they never appreciated before. The way your tone softened a hard moment. The way your presence made a space feel calm. The way your steady love made them feel whole. But it's not your job to explain the value of what's no longer on the table. You've explained enough. Now your absence will do the talking. And here's what happens next. Slowly, your world starts to reorganize. Not everyone will follow you into this new chapter. But the ones who do, they will meet you differently. With respect. With reciprocity. Because you've raised the bar. And Taurus, your new life? It won't require constant explaining. Constant proving. Constant emotional availability. It will meet you where you are, grounded, clear, whole. So if you're in this space now where you're starting to say no, starting to reclaim your energy, starting to let go without fanfare, I want you to trust it. This is not a breakdown. It's a realignment. And it's happening exactly when it's meant to. Because in Gate 3 we'll talk about the quiet rebirth that happens when Taurus stops holding on and starts holding herself. Gate 3. The rebirth that doesn't need to be announced. When Taurus comes home to herself, rebirth doesn't always look like fireworks. For Taurus, it often looks like soft mornings where you feel calm in your own skin for the first time in a long time. It looks like clearing out drawers you once filled with things for other people, like listening to a song that used to break you and realizing it doesn't hurt anymore. That's how it begins. Quiet, undeniable, yours. See, Taurus isn't the type to reinvent herself loudly. Your transformation happens like the earth shifts, slowly, steadily beneath the surface until one day the landscape is just different, more fertile, more honest, more alive. This is what I saw in Lena, a 47-year-old Taurus I worked with a year ago. After 2 decades in a caregiving role, first as a daughter, then as a mother, then as a partner, she came to me feeling invisible. "I don't know who I am if I'm not needed," she said. So we didn't start with some massive life overhaul. We started small. 1 evening a week just for her. A new journal. A walk without checking her phone. The decision to eat dinner outside alone under the stars. First it felt strange. Selfish, she called it. But then something shifted. She told me, "I'm beginning to enjoy my own company again." That's new. And that, Taurus, is the seed of rebirth. Self-enjoyment. Not productivity. Not performance. Just presence. There is nothing passive about this kind of return. It's radical. Because for someone who has spent so long holding everyone else, choosing yourself feels like rebellion. But it's not rebellion, it's restoration. You begin to water what actually grows you. You no longer offer explanations for your stillness. You stop negotiating your boundaries. You stop apologizing for wanting more, needing less, or saying no. You remember that your worth isn't in how much you endure, how much you give, or how much you can tolerate. Your worth is inherent. It's in the fact that you exist, that you breathe, that your presence is enough, even when you offer nothing else. The world might not clap when you reclaim yourself, but your body will. Your nervous system will soften. Your sleep will deepen. Your spirit will stop bracing for the next emotional emergency, because you're no longer abandoning yourself to manage other people's comfort. And here's the most beautiful part. Once you cross this threshold, you start to attract differently. People who meet you with honesty, not obligation. Who listen without taking. Who see you not for what you provide, but for who you are when you're not performing. This is the love you were always worthy of, Taurus. Not the kind that requires exhaustion, but the kind that feels like home. So take this moment, not to hustle into another version of yourself, but to rest in who you already are. Let this be the chapter where your life slows down enough for your soul to catch up. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You've already done the hardest work. You stopped abandoning yourself. And that's the kind of rebirth the stars celebrate in silence. Conclusion: the moment you realize you were always enough. Taurus, if you've stayed with me this far, I want you to pause and feel that your presence, your willingness to listen, to feel, to receive. This moment isn't small. It's sacred. Because what we've just walked through together wasn't just a story about loss or letting go. It was a remembering. You didn't become powerful the moment you left. You were already powerful, you just stopped giving that power away. You didn't find peace by changing who you are. You found peace when you stopped explaining yourself to people who never really wanted to understand you. You didn't get better because of some dramatic awakening. You got softer, realer, quieter. And in that softness, something stronger than anger grew. Self-respect. That's what this entire journey has been about. You've realized that closure doesn't always come in the form of an apology. That healing doesn't always need witnesses. That sometimes the most radical thing you can do is live a life that no longer needs to be justified. So here's what I want to ask you now. What part of you is finally breathing again? What emotion have you quietly carried that's ready to be laid down? And if even one line from this message spoke to you, let that be the permission you didn't know you needed. Taurus, your transformation is not measured in productivity. It's measured in presence. It's not about who notices. It's about how you feel when no one's watching. And if you're starting to feel lighter, freer, more you, then yes, you're doing it right. So please, if this message held a mirror to your heart today, I invite you to do 3 small things. Like this video if your soul whispered yes at any point. Subscribe if you want more truth that doesn't ask you to perform for it. And most of all, leave a comment below. Not just for me, but for someone else who might be sitting in silence, wondering if they're the only one walking this path. They're not. You're not. And if you're wondering what's next, stay close. In upcoming episodes, we'll explore how Taurus can build new love from healed soil, how to stay soft in a world that tries to harden you, and how to claim your next season. Not through striving, but through allowing. You've walked through fire. Now you rise in peace. You're not becoming someone new. You're finally coming home to who you've been all along. And trust me, that version of you, she's breathtaking.